Hey, friends, it's Friday, and before we try to enjoy the weekend, I thought it would be worthwhile to have a conversation about the impact of overturning Roe v. Wade with Reshma Saujani. I want to make sure, Adriana, everyone can hear me. Can you all hear me? Hi. Anyway, a really big news day, and we want to talk about what this all means. Reshma is a leading activist. I don't know if you all know Reshma. She's amazing. She started Girls Who Code, special plan for moms, and she's really been focusing on how to help women and the economic impact of this Supreme Court decision. Reshma, hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can totally hear you. Can you hear me?
I can. Thanks for hopping on this Instagram live, and hi everybody. Gosh, I don't think I've even really fully processed what's happened, despite the fact that we've known for some time, given the leaked draft, that this was the direction the court was going to take. Having said that, there was some thinking, Reshma, that it might be modified or pulled back a little bit, that John Roberts would prevail. I sound kind of muffled. Okay,
Now you sound fine. Now you
okay.
sound fine.
Okay, I'm just going to hold this up like this. So, Reshma, I know that we have a lot to talk about. You've written a lot about this. You wrote an op-ed about the role businesses can play in supporting abortion rights. You wrote an essay in May called "The Opposite of Abortion Isn't Motherhood, It's Injustice." So let's talk about sort of the impact of this decision on mothers everywhere and on working women in general, because as you know, almost 12 million women were pushed out of the workforce at the beginning of the pandemic. I don't know what the exact number is at this point, but just talk to me a little bit about the impact of this decision in your view.
Yeah, I mean, we're still missing over 1 million women. And the reason why, we're still missing a million women who are moms. And the reason why working women can't return back to their workforce is because we live in a country that doesn't have affordable childcare, that doesn't have paid leave, that doesn't offer or support flexibility or predictability in schedules. And so women are constantly juggling putting food on the table and taking care of their children. And the thing about abortion is it is about motherhood too. 6 out of 10 women who get abortions are mothers. Half of those are getting abortions who have 2 or more kids. So it's often a financial decision that is painful for women to have to make. And so forcing birth, which is what the Supreme Court did today, let us be clear. In a country that doesn't have affordable childcare, that doesn't have paid leave, that doesn't have, that has high rates of infant mortality, for Black and brown women, is unconscionable. And so in the hypocrisy of it, to do it the day after we essentially, had the gun decision in Supreme Court, where so many of us as mothers, are terrified every time we drop our babies off at school. And to do that and to say that that's a states' rights issue, and that's not a states' right issue. It is an unvarnished, protected right under the Constitution. And the hypocrisy of the very next day overruling Roe v. Wade, which has been Supreme Court precedent since 1973. It's too much.
Forced birth is a human rights violation that is classified as torture by the UN. And this is basically forcing women to continue their pregnancies against their will. I think that's so ironic, isn't it? And the United States is very far behind most developed countries in their policies about this.
Absolutely. They're the worst. And we're the only industrialized nation that doesn't have paid leave. We offer the lowest amount of support for families for childcare, $500 in the US, average per family, where the average in industrialization is around $16,000 for support. So again, we're saying that this is about babies and about protecting children when our policymakers are offered every opportunity to support families, they don't do it. They rather bail out airlines than bail out moms. And so, we have to reconcile the hypocrisy and just acknowledge that this is about control. This is ultimately about having control because, as Gloria, we were with Gloria Steinem the other day, as she said, if you don't have control over your body, you don't have control over any aspect of your life.
Let's talk about these states with trigger laws. I know there are 13 states that will trigger laws that will make abortion illegal, and then there are additional states that where it will likely become illegal in the weeks and months to come. So we're talking about half of the country being unable to obtain an abortion, and discussions in some states about making it illegal to help anyone drive across state lines in order to obtain an abortion.
Yeah, it's and the vast majority of women that are living in those states, are women of color who are going to be affected, are poor women who are not going to have the resources to even drive across state, who do not, we live in New York City, right? Our rights are going to be protected, maybe, you know what I mean? For the moment, but we have to think about all of those women who don't have that. I mean, I don't know if you saw the article in the Washington Post about the woman, who was, essentially had twins and,
Yes.
Was in Texas. I mean, that is really, what you're seeing. And even, hearing from her partner and the economic devastation on his life, of having, again, to force birth of those children. And we need to be talking about that. The other thing that Hillary always talks about is women are going to die. The reason why many of these other nations like Mexico rolled back, that had, outlawed abortion, actually changed the law is because women started dying. You have a woman who is 25 weeks pregnant, finds out that, her baby is going to have, an abnormal birth defect and he's going to die. But, and so you have the choice of either waiting to term and the baby dying then or having to have an abortion. And so I know women who've had to make this choice. Now, if you're a doctor and you're in that procedure and the baby's heartbeat is still there, but the woman is struggling, he is not allowed to choose her life over the baby's, even though the baby is going to die the minute it's out of utero. And so, and there's no and it's criminalized now. And so this has happened in many countries where abortion is illegal, where women have died. And that is exactly what is going to happen in the United States. And I would say it's exactly what's going to happen in a couple of months. And then we're going to have to look at ourselves.
Let's talk about the reaction. What are you hearing from a lot of your followers and from people who are part of the abortion rights movement?
Well, I think what I'm hearing is that there's a lot of grief. I think we knew this was coming, but I think people are still processing it and it doesn't feel real. I think that there's a lot of anger. And I'm just going to say this, I'm writing a piece about this. I was not happy with our president today in telling women to stay calm and to be peaceful. And I just think that, again, it's like this other slap in the face that we can't actually, articulate how we feel and feel how we feel, which is anger at not having control over our very own bodies, that is fundamental. And to continue to tell women to just kind of put up with it and be quiet and be silent, it just shows me that people at the very top don't understand how fundamental that this is. And so I tell my supporters, be mad, be angry, get on the streets and get real tactical. I was actually spent my afternoon with a bunch of young people in crypto because I've been working on something called a Choice DAO, to build a crypto fund to essentially distribute funds, to abortion organizations on the ground. And so you can, distribute them dynamically. And I was in this room of 30, 20-year-old men who are as pissed off, and white men, who are as pissed off and fired up. And so that's what I want to see. I really feel like we all got to basically get real tactical, get real angry, and get real loud. I mean, we were talking about this at the dinner the other night. The first thing that Hitler did when he came to power was close down abortion clinics. It is a sign, of fascism. Democracies who roll back rights are not full functioning democracies. And so I love my country. I am a patriot. And as a patriot, we have to continue to fight for this right, period.
In a brief filed as part of the original Mississippi case that this ruling stems from, it was argued that abortions are not necessary anymore because women can, quote unquote, have it all, and pregnancies are not disruptive now as they were once. And what's your reaction to
I
that?
mean, yeah, Justice Barrett, I mean, her opinion, her saying that was so so tone deaf, so privileged. You know, that the reality is that women who, you know, there's no having it all, it's doing it all. And we saw this in the pandemic, that so many women were struggling. You know, I would actually give some credence to some of these positions if at the same time they were marching for paid leave and fighting for childcare and fighting to create a structure of care in society where women can actually thrive and have work. But they're not fighting for those things. They're actually fighting against those things. And so the reality is the vast majority of women, I would say the majority of women, are working to work because we live in a country that doesn't have the basic supports that women need to participate in the workforce. And so that entire opinion that, well, now things are great, I mean, look at women thriving, is just, it's so in contradiction to the reality of what women are facing. 51% of women are anxious and depressed. 2/3 of caregiving work is done by women. You know, women were basically the ones mostly affected economically by the pandemic because they had to supplement their paid labor for unpaid labor. So, you know, this has disastrous effects. And so to not be able to choose, when do I want to have a child? How do I want to have a child? How am I going to balance having a child and taking care of the children I do have? Taking that autonomy away, you know what I mean, from women and from families. And this isn't a women's issue. This is a family issue. I mean, there are a lot of men, partners, who are affected by this decision too. I want to see more men, and that's why I was proud to be in the room I was in today, standing up and saying, you're taking away my rights too. And I'm going to stand and fight for this.
It was also pretty terrifying to see what Clarence Thomas was saying about other court cases that need to be revisited. A court case in Connecticut about contraception to married couples, Obergefell, the Obergefell decision that sanctions, you know, made it legal to marry someone you wanted to marry, even if that person was the same sex as you. It's that to me, well, is also deeply concerning.
Yep. I mean, it should be concerning to everybody. You know, I'm a lawyer. I read, you know, both of those opinions. And, you know, the basic argument that Alito and Thomas are making is that if the right didn't exist at the founding of our country, you're not entitled to it. And so the reality is that at the founding of our country, the right to have an interracial marriage didn't exist. The right to have a gay marriage didn't exist. The right to contraception.
Vote. Women couldn't vote.
Women couldn't vote.
All were considered 3/5 of a human being.
Exactly. I mean, so are you basically saying, is the majority of our Supreme Court essentially saying that all of those rights, so are we going back to, you know, are we going back to segregation? Are we going back to slavery? Are we going back to all of these vile, you know, laws that we had in place? Because there's no way that you can actually read this opinion and not then come back. And all it takes, Katie, is one clerk. It takes one clerk denying a marriage license to an interracial couple. It takes one clerk in some county denying a marriage license to a same-sex couple. And that
Clarence Thomas doesn't want Loving v. Virginia to be re-examined.
One would think.
Right?
Yeah, one would think. Because he's in an interracial marriage, is that what you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, by the way, I just want to tell everyone joining us, Reshma, that I'm talking to Reshma Saujani. She's a leading activist and founder of Girls Who Code, Marshall Plan for Moms. Reshma, you just wrote a book too.
Yep, I wrote a book called Pay Up, which is, you know, talking about redesigning the future of work. It's crazy how pressing that is now. I mean, again, if we're living in a country with forced birth, it's even more important for us to fight for paid leave, affordable childcare, all the structural support that women need to actually thrive before forcing them to have children.
I wanted to ask you about what businesses can do. We've seen several businesses coming forward, ensuring that their employees would be able to have abortions if they desired. I think companies, I have it written down here, like Bumble, I think Yelp, Netflix, Disney, among them, they're setting up funds to pay for travel. What other steps should corporate America be taking in your view?
I mean, I think that they should not be doing business in states that are going to be taking away the right from women, period. You know, there has to be a price that these governors, you know, essentially these state houses, you know, pay for essentially taking away people's basic human rights. So I think it needs to go further than just, you know, well, first of all, Katie, a lot of people that I've talked to, you know, over the past couple of weeks are just, you know, everyone I've talked to today, and I was like, oh, so what are people talking about at work? And it's like, well, the leadership doesn't want to talk about it. Nobody wants to address it. And that's got to change, you know, because we have got to start, you know, there should be, like, it's like the president not saying the word abortion. You know, we have to stop having this sense of like there's something shameful about having liberty and freedom over your body. And so every time we talk about it in a cloak of shame, and we do it quietly, like we quietly put, you know, the ability to travel or, you know, the ability for your company to pay for your abortion, you know, in the back of your health benefits, but we don't publicize it. We don't want to talk about it. We don't want to be public about it. It actually re-emphasizes, you know, I think, you know, again, what some of the people in the Republican Party are trying to do, which is make you feel ashamed about abortion. And so, yeah.
Evangelical Christians have created such a huge, powerful base of support among anti-abortion activists. I remember when the draft was leaked, people were talking about how NARAL, the National Abortion Rights Action League, and Planned Parenthood, and the lack of organization or galvanizing forces that were uniting women and, you know, coming up with the same kind of strength of movement that anti-abortion forces have. Why is what is the opposition to the Supreme Court decision? Why does it seem to many people to be so weak and disorganized?
I mean, I don't know. It feels like, listen, I don't think we've always been successful in building organization in the women's movement on the left. And I think we know that. And, you know, and I think there's too much infighting, there's so much drama, there's so much, you know, there's not a lack of, and I think part of it, Katie, is because lots of these organizations feel like they're fighting over the same resources. You know, I see this in the work that I'm doing. And so when a new person comes in, a new idea comes in, everybody is like, wants to, you know, they're fighting for their territory. And that's, you know, that's because we don't invest enough on the left on structural change. We fall in love with candidates, and we put billions of dollars into like Beto and all these people, but we don't invest in structures. And so we're all fighting over this really, really, really small pot of money. And so innovation can't happen. People always like, how did you build Girls Who Code? I'm like, I raised $100 million. That's how I taught all those kids. The typical women's organization is 2 million, 1 million, 3 million, and you can't get anything done. So you're fighting with each other. So we have to really, as philanthropists, relook at that. I think the second thing is, look, I think a lot of the messaging is it's just not working, right? I believe that in many ways, for example, when I talk about this as forced birth, it resonates more than the word abortion. So I'm not emotionally tied to the word abortion, but I'm emotionally tied to like us talking about what we're actually talking about. You know, the second thing is I think that this is about motherhood. The vast majority of those that get abortions are mothers. And tying choice and motherhood is not something we've done, you know, and that's something that should have been there from the beginning, because the pro-life movement, even their language, who doesn't want to be pro-life, right? Mm-hmm. And so I think that now maybe it's time to blow some of this up and find new language, new organizations, new leaders, you know, continue to support the ones who've been doing the work, but we have to be open to saying we've lost this fight. And we got to re-examine the way that we did things, and we got to be radically open to doing things differently. A big part of that is, I think, getting in men. I mean, it takes two people. You know what I mean? Two people make a choice. It affects two lives. And so this is not a women's issue. This is an issue about freedom. And so I just think that in this moment, and the Republicans are even the way right now, and what we're building at Marshall Plan for Moms is going to be the response to this, but so smart. I was just talking to a bunch of organizers, and they say, you know, when you knock on doors now, people are not identifying as Republicans. they're identifying as parents, right? And you look up Liberty Mom's website, and it's all about protecting our kids and making sure that they have, and so they're organizing around parents. And so I think it's like we have got to take these emotional identities that matter to people. We are the party of parents' rights. We are the party of moms. And being a party of protecting mothers' rights is a party that protects reproductive rights.
Okay, you're frozen on my screen, but you're fine on Adriana's. Hey, in closing, I wanted to ask you about some of these abortion funds. I know that one of my followers wanted to know what are legitimate abortion funds we can donate to that help provide care and transport and housing for women who need safe abortions.
Yeah, I mean, I've been raising money for Abortion Funds, the organization, and they're the ones that are essentially giving funding to clinics, to people to make sure that their abortions are funded and their travel is funded. And that's where I'm putting my resources right now.
And Reshma, I wanted to mention that we are in the midst of a 6-part podcast on Next Question, my podcast, really talking about Roe v. Wade, the history of it, what life was like before abortion became legal in the United States, what happened, how popular culture has addressed this issue or not, and what life after Roe is likely to be like for millions of women. So everyone should check out that podcast. Reshma, thanks for taking the time to talk with us today.
Thank you for always using your voice and your platform. I think we're in the new stage of a fight right now, and we all have to be, we got to think out of the box, and we got to do things differently.
And I think that people need to understand sort of what's happening and how they can really turn their anger into action. So when you find that out, let me know and I'll share it with my followers.
I will, for sure. Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Reshma.